Congratulations, you've been chosen to be a beta reader. You're trusted with an early, imperfect edition of a book. I'm here to guide you to being an A+ beta reader with 5 things to keep in mind. Beta reading is when a writer gives a manuscript to a group of test readers, aka beta readers, for feedback before the work is actually published. As a beta reader, your job is to provide constructive feedback to the writer to incorporate in the final work. Beta readers are there to help the author understand how general audiences will react to their work. My name's Jacob, I'm an author and a fellow beta reader. All right, so let's get into it. The first tip is to actually keep your word that you'll actually be reading the book. The author is going to be beyond ecstatic to share their work with you, and you should take this seriously. It's not just an early read. The final edition of the book is dependent on your feedback. So if you say less fart jokes, it means less laughs, and that'll be your fault. I've beta read for a handful of projects at this point, and you can tell how much it means to each writer that someone took the time to actually read their work, especially when it's not in pristine condition. You're making someone's dream become a reality. And this is coming from someone who's been promised to have a beta reader, but then they don't follow through. It's disappointing. I was left wondering, is my book simply bad? Is it terrible? Did they get bored? Did they hate it? Did they simply just not have the time? All of these questions are left unanswered, or were left unanswered, because every time a beta reader has failed to do their job, they ghost you. Don't be that person. Make sure before you commit to a project that you can actually dedicate the time, the effort it takes to read a book, notate it, and provide functional feedback. It's going to take time and effort on your part. Every author will be grateful for your assistance, but know what you're getting into. My second tip, I want to talk about credentials. What credentials do you need to be a beta reader? I'll be the first to tell you that you do not have to have a degree in literature or art. I certainly don't. I took one college creative writing class where I wrote a poem about Twitter and wishing The Rock would follow me back. And I've beta read a handful of books and gotten good feedback on my feedback. Anyway, I digress. You don't even have to be an author or a writer to be a beta reader. I believe the minimum criteria to be a beta reader is to simply be a reader who understands why they like or dislike stories, and are able to articulate your reasonings for why you do or don't like something. That's more than enough. A credential plus would be if you have knowledge on storycraft, pacing, character arcs, etc. Then you can beta read genres more broadly. And by broadly, I do think that if you are a reader, you should try to beta read a story genre you're familiar with. For example, I read fantasy, some literary fiction, and thrillers. I would not be a good beta reader for nonfiction or historical fiction stories. I spend more time thinking about fart jokes than I do the Roman Empire, if you know what I mean. Anyway, each book should have many beta readers, meaning there should be a wide variety of experiences coming from different readers. Each reviewer should bring their own unique reading experiences to this story. So to sum up, you don't need a degree or even be an author or a writer to be a beta reader. Just be a critical thinker. My third point is to focus on story, not syntax. When given a manuscript to read, and before you even begin reading, the author should provide you with a list of story elements they are looking for feedback on. This should be provided from the author and be specific to the story. But beyond these unique elements, there should be things that each beta reader should be aware of as they go into a story. First of all, your job is to be a reader, not an editor. Know the scope of your job. You should not be tasked with providing line-level edits. That's a ton of work. You're probably beta reading for free. Editors get paid a lot of money to do those things. You shouldn't be held to the same standard as a paid professional, which is roughly 2 cents a word if you're curious about the going rate. These stories aren't going to be perfect when they're handed to you. It's the reason you're reading that work. Temper the expectation to see a polished narrative. There will be spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, and other syntax issues. You don't have to worry so much about those. I can understand it can be hard to ignore. As a beta reader, you can point out these issues, but I would recommend that instead of focusing on the grammar, you focus on the larger picture. Stuff like, does the story make sense? Can you easily follow the plot? Are there plot holes? Are the characters likable? Or are they well-defined? These are some general examples of items to focus on. And again, the author should provide a more detailed list of what you as a reader should focus on. Some of those things could be the tropes of the genre. It could be characters' motivations. It could be the setting. It could be a list of things that the author wants you to focus on. But in general, you are essentially reading to vibe check the story. And for the love of God, don't decrease the number of fart jokes in the book. We need to laugh more as a society.
Fart jokes aren't funny.
Katie, I'm recording, please. And yeah, they are funny. My fourth point is be specific, not vague. You now know what you should be focusing on while you're beta reading, but how do you go about making sure you hit all of these points? Take notes as you go along your read. Don't try to read through the manuscript and jot down your thoughts at the very end. You'll often forget what you were thinking in the moment as you read it. And how the story wants you to feel at the end may not be how the story wants you to feel at the halfway point or the quarter point. My advice here is to leave comments as your thoughts happen in the moment. For instance, most times when you beta read, it's not going to be a physical book. More than likely, it's going to be a Google Docs link or a Microsoft Word file. There's an option to leave comments at any point in the file. Leave the comment. Leave the comment at the specific time that it popped up in your mind. It's immensely helpful as an author to know your exact thoughts at the time you had them. And as you leave your comments, don't worry about them being academic level feedback. If you can provide them at that level, fantastic, but it's not necessary, unless you're beta reading a scientific paper on why fart jokes need to make a comeback in literature. Sometimes pointing out how you felt as you read a section is all the author needs to fix the issue. For instance, I've left comments during one of my own beta reads where I felt the story was lacking some context, and I couldn't totally articulate exactly what context it was missing. The stories kind of jumped scenes too quickly or leapt in logic, and that didn't make sense to me as a reader. I couldn't pinpoint why it felt jarring, but I was able to convey my thoughts that something was missing. The author read my feedback and fixed the issue, and after a while, they asked me to reread the chapter and it flowed much better. The author then knew the context that was needed to make the story a little bit better. So in general, don't shy away from your specific thoughts on the story. It's the reason you're reading this. This is the one time that we are asking for your opinion. My fifth and final point is to balance your critique. At the end, when you hand the book back, you're going to be providing criticism. It's kind of the whole point of beta reading. If we wanted someone to read our book uncritically, we would have just published it. But as authors, we want this story, our stories, to be as good as they can be. And hearing others' opinions is just a mandatory part of the process. But, and this is a big but, how you deliver your critique is important. An author is trusting you with their work. They put a bit of their soul into this manuscript. It's not helpful to just tear the manuscript apart. Personally, I've received feedback from an individual that ultimately was right. The opening of my book sucked. It hurt to hear, but the way they delivered it was truly terrible. It made me feel small, and I really didn't want to take their feedback because it felt like they were just being mean, to say that they're the better writer. Don't be that person. Giving criticism is sort of an art form. There are good ways to announce bad news. You have to balance that feedback, that criticism. There will be bad stuff in the read, definitely. There's going to be stuff you didn't like, but there's almost always going to be something you did like in the manuscript as well. It's equally important for the author to hear what is working as well as what isn't working. Layer the criticism. Start with something good, and then you can go back to talking about things that worked and kind of alternate between the good and bad if possible. For example, some of the good stuff you could focus on is, I love this character. I love the setting. This line is funny. This line is thought-provoking. I didn't see the twist coming. But at the same time, you shouldn't shy away from giving unfavorable feedback. But there are good and bad ways to share that feedback. Contextualize your criticism. If you didn't like something, try your best to explain why you didn't like it. And this also works for the parts that were great of the story. Try your best to explain why those parts worked. And then the author could take that advice, that feedback, and try to make those things work even better more throughout the story. And if you come across the unfortunate situation where the book you're reading is awful from front to back, first of all, I'm sorry that you have to be the one to break the bad news, but a way to say that could be something like, I can tell you put a ton of work and thought into this story. Finishing a book is no small feat, but then layer in your criticism. You're at least still acknowledging the hard work they put in as an author. Overall, with this point, I don't want beta readers to shy away from giving negative feedback. That's a lot of what you're doing here. But again, it's easy to focus on what doesn't work in a story, where I think we should equally focus on the stuff that is working in the story. As a beta reader, you can make this story become something fantastic, something amazing. And for that to be the case, the author has to know what is working that makes this story great, so they can turn that bad stuff into something great. I hope you found this guide helpful. Thank you for offering your services as a beta reader. By reading someone's work, you are making their dreams come true. You'll be part of creating something wonderful. Take pride in that. Let me know if you found this guide to be helpful as you've gone through your own beta reads, or if you found this helpful as an author looking for beta readers. Best of luck to all my writers and readers out there. Bye.